Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going to start with DA Amory Schubert.
Thank you. So after the last 2 years of court proceedings, many people have asked and wondered, really, who is Joseph DeAngelo? Is he a feeble, old 74-year-old man? Is he psychologically impaired? Is he physically impaired? Is he even competent to stand trial or to enter those guilty pleas we saw on June 29th when he rolled in a wheelchair and feigned feebleness? The answer to those questions that so many people have wondered for the last 2 years lies within the definition of a sociopath. A sociopath, in our world, we understand, is a person who has no respect for the rights of other human beings, no respect for the law, no compassion, no empathy, no remorse. He is a person who lacks a conscience or a soul. And under the definition of a sociopath, he is a person who lies, deceives, and manipulates others for no other reason than personal gain. Over the last 2 years, since the first day he was wheeled into a courtroom for his arraignment in a wheelchair in April of 2018 to the day of his plea on June 29th, to this entire week, sitting stone-faced in front of the world, each of us has witnessed a sociopath in action. The truth of who Joseph DeAngelo is lies not just in what happened in the courthouse, but what has happened in his jail cell. One only needs to look back a few months from today to see the real Joseph DeAngelo. We, as part of this team, felt that it was critically important to show the victims, the public, and perhaps the world, this sociopath in action. And I again would remind you of how things unfolded on June 29th when he pled. This is only a snippet of a CD anybody wishes to have at the end of these proceedings of his actions within his jail cell. This is June 1st, just a couple weeks before he pled. He's not a feeble old man, as he portrayed himself to be on June 29th. The next video I'm going to show you is from June 17th, just 12 days before. And before I play this, I ask you to watch it closely. Watch it for what he does, watch his flexibility, watch his dexterity, watch his mental drive. Think back on the crimes that he committed. Think back about what he did to escape. Think back what he did to shadow the light. Mr. Totten reminded us a few minutes ago of how Mr. DeAngelo attempted to hide the light so he could remain in darkness during the commission of his crimes. And when we watched this, we were struck by what happened 45 years later. And we hearkened back to those crimes of what he did to hide the light and to remain in the darkness. These are photographs from some of the crime scenes where he put blankets over televisions or lights. And so when you look back in time 4 decades and you now stand in the presence of 2020, you can see that Joseph DeAngelo is no different today than he was 45 years ago. And lastly, just a couple weeks ago, as you see on the top there, again, he's moved to a new cell, I believe, and he's got light once again covered with papers. And this last one is to simply demonstrate to you his mental acuity, his dexterity, his ability to deceive or attempt to deceive the entire world into believing he is a feeble old man. These are just snippets into the window of the mind of a sociopath. He is quite simply the definition of one. He has and always will be a sociopath in action. Today, the world knows that. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Spitzer, for his additional comments.
You know, we've talked so much about this case over the course of many months, and today really is and was the sentencing. And I made a comment earlier about just how proud I am to have worked with these prosecutors and their teams. To all the victims, I just want to say something. I know you know this, but I don't think the public understands sometimes. Just the fact that there was dogged perseverance and people never gave up to solve this case. The law enforcement community, I personally, and I know my colleagues, because we are part of law enforcement, that I want to congratulate them publicly. And I want to do it because I've talked to so many of the victims and certainly the victims from Orange County, and I know just how thankful they are. And these are dedicated people. Many were retired, came back into public service to help solve this case. I hadn't seen these videos of the convict, to quote Drew Witten, one of my victims from Orange County, who was a police officer in Garden Grove for 20 years. I hadn't seen these videos until today. But in our own presence, just a few minutes ago, quite frankly, Mr. DeAngelo tried to pull a fast one on all of us in our own presence, and we were witnesses to it. I'm not sure you saw how quickly he stood up out of his chair. I'm not sure you saw how strong his voice was. That voice was completely inconsistent with the body that he was trying to fake us all out with. My voice isn't even that strong. Younger than he is. There's something about the proceeding that really upset me when he stood up and gave his statement. They tried to shift the sympathy table here today. They tried to get all these people covering this story to say something nice or empathetic about this monster. I was fixated the entire time on his eyes. The eyes are the windows to people's soul. He never looked up once, either during any of our statements or any of his own loved ones' statements. Everything this week was testimony of victims who despise him and his conduct. Today, we heard from people who love him. And this is what he didn't do, which upsets me greatly in his statement. He said, "I've listened to all of your statements. I'm very, truly sorry to everyone I have hurt." Everyone. Who did he leave out? The people who say they love him. He didn't just destroy your lives. Could you imagine being the daughter of James DeAngelo? Going through life asking yourself, did he pass on through my genetic framework something that makes me somehow the same? Or his former wife, the betrayal to their marriage and that relationship. He not only hurt all of you, he left a wake of devastation with his family members who have part of him inside of them. And that has got to be a terrible, terrible, terrible nightmare. So he tried to fake us out. And by leaving out his relatives, he proved to me that it was a fake. That statement apologizing was a fake, because if he was truly remorseful about apologizing to everyone, to quote him, who he hurt, he would have included a hell of a lot more people. So I just want to say this. I am begging you not to report it that way. I think it was my colleague from Tulare County who said that this is going to go into the history books. The history cannot be remembered that he stood up here and apologized to the victims. It can't be that his niece said he was the most beloved person in her life. It can't be a friend who said he was one of the he was the sixth boy in the family. That was an effort to humanize him. You cannot humanize him. I feel so sorry for the family members and the friends who had any connection whatsoever. I don't besmirch them or in any way denigrate what they tried to offer here today. But I will not allow, as an elected prosecutor representing at least the 3.3 million people in Orange County, to have him remembered that way during his sentencing. It was a sham. He was not remorseful. He failed to apologize to important people. He left devastation in his tracks. I can never forgive him. Some of you are more mature and more spiritual than me. You have gone to a higher place than I can. I can't forgive him. I never will, which is why I told him I wanted to watch him die. I wanted to watch him put to death. And I've already explained that, and there's no reason to dwell on it any longer. Today, when you leave this building, many of us will never see each other again. I want you to know that this has been one of the proudest moments in my career as a prosecutor. Whether as the elected or a line prosecutor, I started my career as a prosecutor, and I will end my career as a prosecutor. And I can tell you, I've never been more proud to be part of this family. You are part of our family. We are always part of your family. Nothing about these proceedings will change that in any way whatsoever. Because I'm told you I was selfish when I told you I wanted to see him put to death, I want to celebrate a moment right now. We did a moment of silence. I would ask you, as the victims' families and survivors, please join me in thanking my colleagues and all the law enforcement officials who are here today for everything they did to bring that, I'd love to, but I can't, that fill in the blank finally to justice. God bless my colleagues.
I'll invite any of my other colleagues up that wish to give a statement. DA Dudley.
I just want to remind everyone that today, good triumphed over evil. Victims who either were recipient witnesses or had to live their life without their loved ones, you're such good people, and you just keep on doing good deeds, and it makes all the difference in the world. And the law enforcement officers, Fred, you've been doing this for 30, 35 years. You followed this case. You were part of this case. And every other law enforcement officer who didn't sleep at night trying to find the answers, your good people and your good dudes happen every day. And above all, I want to thank Anne Marie Schubert. She was our hero in all of this. She was the one who stood up and said, let's find him. And she inspired all the other district attorneys on this stage to work harder in this case. And we did. And Anne Marie Schubert, if it wasn't for you, none of us would be here today. Thank you. Thank your team.
I'm just going to say it, Team Justice. Anybody else? DA Becton, DA Ward, DA Salazar from San Joaquin?
Good afternoon. On behalf of San Joaquin County, we would like to thank District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, her team, her victim advocates, her investigators, my brothers and sisters from neighboring counties for their teams and their hard work and dedication to making this a day of justice, a day of truth. But most of all, I would like to thank you, each and every one of you, the victims, the survivors, families. Today is not about him. Today is about you. We're in a country that needs heroes. It needs people to admire and respect, to look up to and to believe in, to know that there is hope and there is goodness. And you, as the victims, the survivors, and the family members, give everybody in the great state of California and the United States of America somebody to look up to, somebody to admire, somebody to believe in, somebody to thrive to be. 1 in 3 women will likely be sexually harassed or raped in their life. 5 out of every 1,000 cases will be reported. But today, you're going to change that. It is one of the most unreported and most traumatizing crimes in our nation. But today, you give the power to the 995 other women out there who couldn't raise their voice because of the fear of what would happen, the fear of reliving it. You put that power in their voice, in their hands, and in their soul, and in their body to rise up so that someday my colleagues and I sit here and we say 1,000 for 1,000 spoke up and raised their voice and justice was sought for. So today, as my colleague from down south said, it's not, don't report about him. Report about these women and these men who've endured unimaginable pain and suffering, no doubt about it, like the likes we have never seen before. If you heard anything these last days, You know what true evil and terror looks like. But better and more important is you know what a hero looks like. You know what a courage looks like. You know what faith and strength in a better world looks like. I had the privilege of working with 4 victims, John and Jane Doe and Bob and Gay, for the last couple of years. Tough as nails, fought as hard as they could for this justice and raised their voice at every step of the way to make sure that they were heard, they were seen, and that justice prevailed. And each and every one of you did that. Each and every one of you are what this story is about, because you're amazing, you're incredible, and you're a testimony to what makes America great. And that is its strength and its courage to look evil in the face and to say, we won, justice prevailed. So on behalf of San Joaquin County, all of the members in my community, we thank the team of prosecutors here. You guys were amazing. Anne-Marie Schubert deserves an award for her leadership and what she has done to bring this case. But each and every one of you deserves a Medal of Honor for the courage and the strength that you have shown and for the power you have given to everybody in our country. So thank you.
Nancy O'Malley, Alameda County.
Thank you. I'm going to just echo everything that has been said already. I will tell you that for me today is I stand with all of the victims and with everyone else. I was there when this guy was raping women. I was in college as a victim advocate, and I went to the hospital with the victims. I talked to victims on the phone who were scared to death that they thought he was in their house. We lived in terror when he was on his reign of terror. And I'm so grateful that Anne-Marie Schubert and all of these incredible prosecutors and district attorneys banded together to make sure that we could solve this crime. I will tell you that this state has passed a law that requires law enforcement to submit every sexual assault forensic exam to a crime lab for testing. Because if we do not submit those exams for testing, that DNA will sit in a police evidence room or in a lab untested. And I'm grateful that we have been so strong in our advocacy to make sure that all kits are tested. And I just want to say that I'm so appreciative of DA Salazar for talking so profoundly about the challenges that women have and men have of stepping forward to talk about their victimization. And this case and the courage of all of the victims and the victim survivors that came up and bravely gave your statement and bravely gave your statement when it happened with law enforcement allows us to put this man away forever. So thank you for reporting this story so thoroughly. It's sensational, but it's also incredibly profound in what it says about our community, our society, and how we need to take care of each other. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll take some questions. Anybody else?
So, yeah,
Take
we're
some
going to,
questions now. Shelley's going to be in charge of all this now.
so anyone who wants to ask a question, please come to this microphone here. Please identify your media organization and your name.
Now that the sentence is over, is there any more information about why he was committing these murders, these rapes in these different communities where he didn't live as well, such as Contra Costa County and Alameda County? Did he travel there? Did he visit people? We saw the statement from the wife saying that he said he'd go pheasant hunting. He says he's going to work, visit his parents from far away. Do we have any more clarity on why he picked those different communities?
I think probably from everyone that's worked on this, whether it's Larry Crompton or Paul Holes or Ken Clark or hundreds of detectives, you can put in all the DAs that have been dedicated. The answer to those questions, I'm not sure we'll ever know, honestly. I mean, I don't want to use the word speculated, but conjectured, have theories. It's the million-dollar question I'm not sure we'll ever know. So unless somebody else has some theory, Greg?
The other aspect of it is this is a common question in major cases of this nature. And what you witnessed today was just the briefest of statements. And I think from a law enforcement perspective, I think we can all agree that we have no confidence that anything this predator would say about why he engaged in this type of conduct would be honest. I think, many other cases we've seen predators try to minimize their conduct or blame it on some circumstance of their childhood or some mental health condition. We have no reason to believe, notwithstanding some of the letters that were read to you, we have absolutely no reason to believe that this man suffered terrible trauma as a child. He lived a normal life. We have no reason to believe that he will ever tell us the truth. And if he does make a statement, we would tend to doubt the veracity of that statement.
I just want to make, before I go to the next question, I just wanted to make it somewhat of an additional comment. And it really is in line with Mr. Spitzer of, his statement today. And one of the victims, I don't remember who it was, but said, his last victims were his family. And I believe that to be true. And we heard some statements today, but I would remind folks that while some folks said he was a normal teenage boy in their neighborhood or group, he was a teenager who was blowing up animals, breaking into homes, and learning how to become a serial rapist and a serial killer. So please don't ever forget who the real man is.
I'm Rowena Shaddix from Fox 40. Is the work on this case completed? Because I've spoken to one of the special agents that investigated this in Sacramento, and he said there were still rapes, murders that he believed was linked to Joseph DeAngelo, but hasn't been proven yet.
I mean, I think we'd all probably collectively say, and many of the folks like Erica Hutchcraft from Orange County, Paul, Ken Clark, Larry Poole, who have dedicated their lives. I mean, we know what we know, Rowena, that's where'd you go. We know what we know. We know, because of the power of the data bank that the Harringtons brought to us, we know what's been put into it, and we know what's been linked. Does that mean that there are not other crimes out there? Absolutely not. I don't believe we will ever know the magnitude of what Mr. DeAngelo did.
Anne Marie Hill, Paige St. John with the Los Angeles Times. Had this case gone to trial, if you had not had the DNA match, would you have had enough evidence to get a guilty conviction?
Well, I mean, that's like asking us to take away evidence that we didn't have, Paige. I mean, we had overwhelming evidence of the signature of the crimes, the manner of which they were committed. Then you find out everything fell in line. He was a police officer. He was in the military. He lived in the areas. But let's be honest, it was the DNA that became the most critical piece of evidence but for that, we wouldn't be here today.
The family tree matching has not yet withstood, as I understand it, direct challenge in criminal court. The majority of cold cases that have been solved have either ended in pleas like this one did, or with defendants who have long been dead. So if a court had ruled that evidence inadmissible, aside from the circumstantial evidence of the geography timing of Joseph DeAngelo's life, did your investigators post-arrest find significant evidence that incriminated him?
Well, he sat in an interview room and he muttered to himself about his mother making him do it, or Jerry, or anybody else. But just to be clear and to flip this really in a positive light is that since, as Mr. Totten said, or others have said, since this arrest, close to 100 cases have been solved. And yes, cases have gone to trial in this country based upon investigative genetic genealogy, and guilty verdicts have come very swiftly. And yes, we've had pleas. And, the last time I checked, somebody doesn't plead to the rape murder of an 8-year-old little girl in Fort Wayne, Indiana, if they actually didn't do it. So I understand it. But like the DNA data bank, when we get a cold hit off the data bank, that's an investigative lead that law enforcement then takes, and then you follow the dude around, collect his DNA, and you have a direct match of the East Area Rapist, Golden State Killer to Joseph DeAngelo. So, yes.
So Todd Spitz, Orange County. Bruce and Ron Harrington testified yesterday in front of the court on their victim impact statement. And one of the things they shared is since the advent of investigative genetic genealogy, we've solved 93 cases throughout the country. That probably would have gone cold forever. When they, prior to introducing Proposition 69 in 2004, there were 1,200 cases solved because of DNA, and now there's 81,000. So I appreciate the question from the Los Angeles Times. I know it's a national periodical, but of course it covers Orange County because I'm just adjacent to Los Angeles. And I want to say this unequivocally. And they said it yesterday, I'm just repeating the words of the Harringtons. That is something that DNA is something I'm going to fight for till I go to my grave to make sure we continue to collect DNA from every felon arrested in the state of California. It has brought more closure to more victims than the advent of anything since the fingerprint. So let's get clear about that. Investigative genetic genealogy has been an eye-opener, and it brought closure, as much as you can give that term, to this case. It was the linchpin that solved this case. I will never make excuses, but some of us are supporting a bill in the California legislature for opt-out on voluntary genetic databases, and the leadership of Anne-Marie Schubert and Greg Totten to come up with guidelines which govern the law enforcement use of how we use DNA. You should check out that periodical and that excellent work, both practical and academic. As prosecutors, we are abundantly protective of people's civil rights and the right to anonymity with respect to the use of DNA. We also know in the balance as government officials, sworn elected officials, that it has also been the biggest eye-opener to the solution of cases to give some peace and some opportunity to people sitting in here today who would have no closure, not even anything close to it, if we didn't have the advent of those two tremendous advances in law enforcement.
We have our two last questions, and then we'll take some call-in questions, online questions.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bernstein from Reuters. I was just wondering, how certain are we that he stopped committing these crimes in the late 80s? And if he did stop them, can you offer any insight as to how someone like that might have been able to stop them? And did it bleed out and did it push out in other ways in his life? Since then, were there other signs? I'm just curious what your insight is.
I think I tried to answer that earlier. I don't think we'll ever know. I mean, honestly, on the day of his arrest, I got a text message from a colleague of a Wikipedia article about when did forensic DNA come into existence, and it coincidentally was 1986. And so, the question needs to be posed to Mr. DeAngelo. Whether he ever tells you the truth or not is, sorry about that.
Madison Wade with ABC 10. The items that were taken from his home, could you speak to what those items were and if any of those were ever returned to some of the victims or survivors, if they belonged to them?
I don't think I can speak to those. I don't think so. I don't know about Amy or Tin or any of the prosecutors, but I don't think it's, at this point, I don't believe the arrest warrant or the search warrants have been unsealed from the court, so I don't think it would be appropriate to comment at this point. Maybe someday, though.
Thank you. We'll now take a few online questions.
This question is from Margaret Carrero with KNX 1070 in Los Angeles. This is to any of the district attorneys. What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
Say that one more time, sorry.
What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
I think Mr. Spitzer made it clear.
I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I'll try to say it more succinctly for radio. It was all BS. The next sentence is, you don't stand up here with any sincerity to the victims and say you're covering everyone and fail to talk about your own family members who you betrayed.
The next question is from Tony Cabrera at ABC 7 in Los Angeles. Where does DeAngelo go from here? When will his prison location be determined, and when exactly will he be transferred there?
Typically, were it not for COVID-19, an inmate like the defendant would be transported to Tracy prison, where he would go through a screening process and eventually placed for a longer term stay. Inmates that are sentenced to life without possibility of parole are characterized as level 4, and there are only a small number of institutions in the state of California that are considered among the most secure and hardened institutions where somebody like this would go. We don't know where he will end up. We also know that at the current time, because of COVID-19, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is not accepting inmates, sentenced inmates. Most jails, I know my jail in Ventura County, I think has close to 80 inmates that have been sentenced to prison that have not yet been transported. And this is becoming an increasing problem around the state for the administration of local custody facilities. And unfortunately, Mr. DeAngelo is a beneficiary of this circumstance, but ultimately, we intend to make sure that he winds up in an appropriate institution for the magnitude of the crimes he committed and the character and the evil nature of this man.
Okay, so that concludes the press conference. There will be interviews with some of the elected DAs, I think some of the victims. We're going to take about a 15, 20-minute break. And then there's our CDs up here with the full video up on this table. Thank you. Yes, they're all the same.
They're all running. Nice job.